Hello everyone. Today on the Rockstar Hour, welcome everyone. We are actually talking about job applications, and we're continuing this conversation based on what we talked about last week when we discussed how to create stellar and standout resumes and some of the key components and the successful ingredients that should be part of your job application recipe. So we definitely walked through some of the sections in detail, actually, in the resume and what they should look like or what they might look like, something that could set you up for success ultimately, and something that can help you stand out. For instance, some of the things that we mentioned last week were using the keywords, something that can help you actually in the application tracking system if a bigger company that you're applying for uses that AI technology, or even if it's the recruiter's eyes that are looking at your resume, again, using those keywords that help you actually stand out, and doing a little bit of preparation before you actually submit your job application and before you go into the interview. Using these keywords will definitely help you set yourself up for success, and overall looking professional in your job application, be it just the email that you're sending where you're attaching your cover letter, where you might be attaching your resume or your professional portfolio, and also including the body of the message with your excitement and the application. So that also matters a lot. Also, how your email address shows up on your resume, maybe your business page on Facebook or your LinkedIn page. All of that actually does play role in the way how you create that first impression and how you show up on your job application. Just remember that for a recruiter, when they spend 7 seconds on assessing your resume, right? Like when they are actually have that very, very limited amount of time, they are making a decision whether to invite you onto the next phase of the interview. It's very important for them to just really pay attention to those key areas that you have put your effort on and have put your attention on and focus on to just really polish and so that they stand out. So today we're actually talking about some of the curveballs that recruiters and your potential employers throw at you when they invite you to the interview. So that's basically the time when you already got your foot through the door, right? Your foot is in the door. You are invited to the next phase, which is amazing. And this round of your application process is going to be all about a recruiter and the potential employer learning more about you, about your professional experience. And that's where these tricky, sometimes challenging questions come in. And this is something that we are going to talk about today. And to be completely honest, it does take time actually for people to get ready for a successful job application. And yes, sometimes we get discouraged, right? Like, oh my gosh, I love this job description so much. I do feel like I'm a good fit. But then when it comes to the interview, sometimes we fail to just really show that excitement or to really prove from the standpoint of your professional experience and from everything that you know how to do, from your skills, that you are the best person for the job. So with this conversation today, I really want us to focus on some of the common questions, some of the typical questions that are more on the challenging and that curveball side, right? That sometimes it's just hard to kind of like come up with a good answer for. And this is something that we just should just dive in and break down. And during this live, I actually wanted to also invite you to submit in comments any of the questions that you might have found tricky in your previous job interviews, or maybe something that you're going through right now. Maybe it's a job application that you are eyeing and that you might want to approach, and then you find in one of the Google Forms maybe, or any other application forms that an employer is asking you to submit, you're just struggling with this particular question that you want to maybe run by us. So I would actually love it if you just would drop it in the comments question. Maybe you have actually one of your most favorite questions that you love to be asked during interviews. You know how sometimes they ask about like your strengths and weaknesses, and how sometimes people say that, oh, well, one of my weaknesses is perfectionism, but it actually can be a strength. So that's just one of the questions that like comes in mind right away that people are actually often asked. It's not, I can't say that it's one of the trickiest ones, because I feel like there's so many Google resources there that you can definitely find like a very good way to actually address the weakness and strength. Some of the questions that I actually want to cover here is, tell me about a time when you made a mistake and how you handled it. So this is a little bit of a curveball, because yes, it does talk about that weak point that was, we all make mistakes. It's that kind of just friction point in our professional experience when, yes, mistakes happen. The main thing that we at Remote Rockstars say is that they don't happen again, that you learn from that experience. And I feel like what's important and the way how you can actually approach the conversation here, again, like you had this challenge as far as, yes, the mistake happened, you acknowledge that it happened for whatever reason, you might have actually very good explanation. So if you add a little bit of a story to this question, I actually think I would want to have a little bit more of a background if I were the employer listening to your response. And then so you have this challenge. And then I would actually want you to focus on the second part of your response, which is the action. So basically, how did you resolve this mistake, this error? What did you do? What action did you take to better? And then we have a result on the other side of the challenge and the action. So basically the challenge plus action equals the result. And I actually would want to hear what maybe measures were taken. Maybe there was a standard operating procedure that you created based on that error that you noticed might be a repeated mistake that someone else can make after you, or that could be just a wrinkle in the process. Maybe that prompted also for you to create a video and to add a little bit of a visual response to how to handle these types of mistakes in the future. Maybe you're actually being proactive and you created a series of either documents or processes or procedures where you anticipated this is not a single mistake that can happen. It can actually also leak into other processes within the business. And here is what I created to make sure to prevent that and to make sure that that doesn't happen again. So actually focusing on those solutions and showing how you took ownership of that fault and maybe how you took ownership and was proactive in that situation. I feel like I would be impressed actually to hear that, and that would take my mind off of the mistake and something that I asked actually in the question. And I would definitely want to hear your dedication to finding the resolution to the problem. So that's just the way how I would actually approach the issue. Question number 2 that I feel like often actually comes up in a conversation closer towards the end of the interview is, what are your business goals? And the thing is that on the one hand, it can kind of sound like a simple question and more of like a general question. On the other hand, I do feel like there is a little bit of a tricky side to it, only because that actually shows your commitment and your dedication to the industry that you're in. So it's not that you just want to be a devoted and loyal employee or contractor, subcontractor in that business, but it's also something that shows up a little bit of like your ambition and your drive as far as like, where do you actually want to take your career? So I would definitely want to hear from our Remote Rockstars team, for instance, when we are interviewing new team players, as far as what is their vision of their career, right? It's not so much of like a long-term plan. I don't need like a 3 to 5 year plan, which you can actually incorporate into this question. I just want to overall hear kind of like their business vision for them, because ultimately when we are virtual professionals and when we work online, we are business owners, whether we realize it or not, where we call ourselves that or not. But once we start working from home, this is our business baby that we're building. It can be as simple as just servicing 2 to 3 clients, maybe professionally online. It may be just some one-off projects. Ultimately, you are actually becoming in business for yourself. And aside from having a separate business account, which I always encourage all virtual professionals to have and to create and to set up from day one of you working together, just to really assess whether this venture is working out for you and your family, aside from all kinds of different legal aspects that should be taken into account. This is actually a really good opportunity for you to share that passion, to share your vision of where you actually see your career taking you. And it's also okay, I feel like, at this point, to let the business owner know that, no, this might not be my long-term vision or my long-term career. This is something that I'm passionate about in the future. I am a multifaceted virtual professional, and I might be focusing right now on the social media strategy, but how about maybe in the future I take it into like kind of like a new realm of like marketing campaigns in total, which, you know, two actually are very much connected, but marketing is more general, and it could be, again, it gives your future employer a perspective and kind of just like a little bit of a sneak peek into your world as far as like what your vision looks like and what you're interested in. And again, so that actually touches on a little bit on just like your professional interests and your drive. So anything that you can share here with passion and with excitement. And I feel like just do it. Go into and dive into the details and let your future employer know what you're about and what you're actually passionate about. Some of the questions that I feel like are more on the from like the personal perspective, right? Like people actually getting to know you a little bit, more of like the culture fit, are questions about like personality fit, right? So some of these that I jotted down that I actually came across, and sometimes my clients prompted me to ask these questions when they were hiring virtual professionals that I was helping them with those hiring projects. What is your favorite fictional character? So something that they want to know, right? So basically, how quick you are to answer this question. It also gives a little bit of again, like a sneak peek into your world as far as like what you're interested in general. And again, that's a culture fit question right there. What is your favorite ice cream flavor? Yes. So are you adventurous? Is there something just like multicolored, multi-flavored that you actually like? Do you like a combination of different flavors plus some sprinkles on top? So something like that, right? Or are you just more kind of like a vanilla, traditional person? Nothing wrong with that, right? And at the same time, again, it gives us a little bit of a sneak peek into your world. What is your favorite animal and why? There's so many actually interpretations, I feel like, of this question. It might be from like the spiritual perspective as far as like, I really identify with this particular animal and here are the reasons, because I identify maybe with their traits or with their features, something that might be from the looks to some of the characteristics that we usually assign to those types of animals, to just, I am in love with cats. And I'm a huge cats lover. There's like nothing really about that, but it's just, I love cats. That's it. Or I'm a huge dog lover, and there's not much about it. So that could be just your favorite animal, right? This is what it looks like to work with me. And they give you X, Y, Z examples. So that could be part of the question. How can you, or can you handle that? How would you handle that? So that's actually a big personality fit question, especially if you are, for instance, interviewing for being an executive or just a regular virtual assistant, right? So for instance, like, this is my working style, this is my working philosophy. How would you handle that? Does that sound good to you? Or how would you approach, handling these traits, right? So that is actually a very good question that goes and almost like borderlines with some values and maybe some core values of the business plus the moral values of your prospective employer. So that's a pretty good one to definitely touch on. I use curse words and I love to communicate in GIFs. Oh my gosh, like this is just like a millennial talking about this, right? Are you okay with that? Again, that's a really good culture fit question and something that also goes or maybe with or against your values. Are you okay with curse words? Like, is that something that you're okay with in the professional setting? Can you live with that? Or is that a red flag for you? I feel like that's just, it's good. It's definitely good to have these curveball questions on your interview because that gives you food for thought. It's not that you're only offering a sneak peek into your professional and personal world, but you are also deriving some information about your prospective employer and making a decision whether you just want to pursue it or maybe this is just not your cup of tea. So I feel like it's always a two-way street. And this is something that I always remind all the candidates that I interview for any of the virtual positions that I help my clients to fill. And I always tell them that it's not that you are just being interviewed for the position. I know you want to be the one chosen candidate, but it's also you need to take this opportunity to maybe some throw curveball questions, and maybe these ones could be good examples for you to just maybe rephrase and then ask your prospective employer, your future boss, and just make sure that this is actually a good fit. So question number 4, outside of those personality fit questions, it's the energy fit, right? Like just like I mentioned earlier, a little bit of the energy, maybe spiritual side of it, especially if we're looking to work with some spiritual business coaches or just spiritual coaches and consultants, period. So that might be actually a good kind of like energy fit commitment type of questions here in this section. And the questions that I jotted down here for us is that share with me your date of birth and your place of birth so I can look it up for some astrological alignment to make sure that we're a good astrological fit. Again, not a very typical question, I would say, or request rather, right? And something that's kind of like out there. Maybe you are not going to feel comfortable sharing that personal information about yourself. And that is, again, a very good opportunity for you to establish that boundary. So basically, where are your professional boundaries in this process, right? Like, are you actually comfortable with that level of personal information or kind of invasion into your life, right? Does that violate your professional boundary? Do you want to give it a little bit of time to think as far as like, well, do I actually want to share this information with someone? Or should we just focus on the professional side of our relationship and not go into the astrological alignment? Whether you believe in it or not, how badly you want that job, ultimately, I do want for you to stay in alignment and in integrity with yourself. So it is important to give this particular question, or maybe some other questions that you feel like are out there, some thought and invest some energy into actually establishing that professional boundary and just decide whether it's a good fit or not. So another question here, submit a video describing why you want to work here, testing whether you are prepared to go that extra mile. That's a little bit of that commitment element here in your application and whether you're truly interested. Again, submitting a video might not be in someone's comfort zone, and it might say, look, I described my professional experience in detail. I provide some visual and some stories with like numbers, my performance, and something that really testifies to the experience and the skills that I offer. I do not feel comfortable submitting a video because I feel like that should speak volumes in itself. So here you go. That might be one side of the answer. And then another response could be, yes, of course. Like I'm happy to be on camera and to record it. And maybe even if I do not feel comfortable, I will still jump in because I'm so committed and dedicated to progress in my job application process that I just want to fully dive in and be 100% there. So that might be just another side of the story or a different type of response. And yeah, so ultimately the decision is up to you. So what basically typically helps you or might help you prepare for a successful interview? I would say that at some point, I feel like in your conversation with your prospective employer, what might come in is that 60 or an opportunity for that 60 to 90 second elevator pitch. And I would definitely encourage you to work on that a little bit at home and basically mention who you are, your key skills and your experience, something that's actually relevant to the job description. Just keep in mind that. So if you are applying for different types of job opportunities, I would tailor your elevator pitch in advance just to make sure that you maybe rehearse a little bit at home and then just again using those keywords that it actually matches that job description, and also why you would be a good fit. That's also a good opportunity to put it in here. Record your elevator speech on your phone and maybe listen to it first and then catch some of the things that you might want to change or maybe rehearse again. And then also watch your performance on video performance, like you rehearsed elevator speech. Make sure that maybe there's something with your body language. Maybe you just sound too energetic, too excited, right? Maybe just to tone that down a bit. So whatever corrections you want to make or whatever adjustments, you make sure that it's just straight on point, it's concise, goes straight to the key points in the job description, and listen to it. Basically, you have to a few times go through it and see if there are any opportunities for refinement. And then maybe Google common and challenging interview questions in advance. Also, aside from some of the questions that we discussed here, anything that talks about your past performance on the job. So have kind of like a story about that, because some of the employees or employers sometimes use kind of like this type of thinking that the past performance on the job is the best predictor of future performance. So have a few really good kind of like key stories there, 4, 6 good stories that you can really use to showcase your professional experience and your skills. Again, using that CAR formula that we talked a little bit about last week, and I mentioned it in the beginning of this video too. It's that challenge, the action that you take, and then the result. So basically anything that helps you to really illustrate, to visualize, and to make that story live and just come alive, right? So use some of the numbers, some of the challenging, again, maybe like some curveball or intricate situations that you were in your previous workplace, and be ready to basically tackle any questions that start with "tell me about." So kind of anticipate maybe some of the stories that you can create based on your professional experience. Tell me time you did that, or tell me about a time when there was a mistake in the process. Tell me about a time when you could not find a good kind of attraction with your coworker, right? Tell me about when there were some frictions in the team and kind of like how did you handle that? So employers definitely want to ask questions that mostly focus obviously on your professional experience, your expertise and skills, and any type of visual story that you can prepare. 4 to 6, like I mentioned, would be actually really helpful here. So as far as like when you're creating that short script for the story and you're using the challenge as your very first part of it, so what was the challenge or problem that you faced, and be specific and describe the project, team, event, and your role. So basically kind of like add a little bit of flavor and that detail as far as like describing the challenge that you dealt with. And then in the action, the second phase of your story, that was, what did you or your team do to answer the challenge or to solve the problem? And don't just speak in we, specify your specific actions and emphasize your professional experience in the way how you describing that action, the initiative that you took, the responsibility, the ownership that you took over that challenge, and then arriving to the very last result phase of your story. Discuss the result achieved, any type of outcome, use metrics, exclamation point, any of the numbers, anything again that can paint a fuller picture that is easier usually to understand and to evaluate when you're using numbers. Some of the other common interview questions. So we already listed a few in the beginning of the video here. Describe a time when you showed initiative and took the lead. So again, a very good formula of CAR, challenge, action, and result that could fit into this question. When you took initiative and when you were leading, right? Number 2, give me an example of a time when you motivated others and how that led to a positive outcome. A pretty good question, I would say, to really showcase your leadership and how you take ownership of the project or maybe some of the events, maybe the team. Describe a time when you had to work with a difficult person, unhappy customer. So that could also be a good opportunity for you to use that CAR formula to prepare a story, right? Tell me about a time when you had to persuade your leadership to make an unpopular decision, right? So something that has to do maybe with discussing a few different results or outcomes of a challenge that was presented to the business, and then you propose the decision that might not have had the support from others, but then you ultimately succeeded in the way how you resolved that issue. And then again, it shows your leadership and the ownership of the challenge that you had in place. And then tell me about a time when you had to solve a problem with very little guidance or direction. And I feel like this is especially huge in the virtual workspace when you do not have, I can't say like as much access, I guess, to your team, because you might very well have a lot of access on Slack and you can always call them, you can always stay connected. But at the same time, when you are at home by yourself, you're working from home, you have your Google Drive, for instance, right? Or your Dropbox, whatever you're storing the documents that you have access to that internal information. You're trying to be as resourceful as possible. So this is going to be a good opportunity to really actually showcase how resourceful you are in your profession, how independent you are, and that you are that action and maybe risk taker, and you can resolve the situation on your own with very little guidance. Great question here. Some of the rules that I would definitely suggest exploring before your interview is that know your audience. And here, as far as this rule, I can tell you that research the company and the role that you're applying for. Do some research for the social media and the blog posts, get some inside scoop maybe on LinkedIn if there are any discussions that are pertinent to the company, or maybe even go to Glassdoor, review some interviews maybe on social media profiles, anything that helps you identify the person who will actually interview you, and then you maybe getting a little bit of research done on their social media profiles to just really find out a little bit more about them, what they're all about, and basically ultimately having a very good response to the question, why do you want to work here? And rule number 2, demonstrate your enthusiasm. It's okay to actually tell them, I'm so excited. I was so excited to see that you posted this role because I'm so passionate to be invited to the interview and to have this opportunity to submit my candidacy. I have some great ideas to help you with this and the other, especially, for instance, if you're applying for like a marketing position or something that has to do with like analytics. So there is something that's very specific, and you can share actually some practical ideas as far as how you can make and create the change and make the impact. I look forward to the next steps on the interview process. It's okay to show that excitement because, again, like, you're engaged, you're committed, and you're dedicated. Rule number 3 is to spend a little bit of time on the interview debrief and basically answering some of the questions for yourself as far as like what went well, right? And what did I not maybe do so well in? What could be improved? What question actually took me off guard? Maybe think about it and just kind of like keep it on the back of your mind. What did I hear during the interview that actually stood out to me, or maybe reconfirmed my interest in this company? Maybe this is something that you can then include in your follow-up email. That would be a really good follow-up on after the interview. What are the next steps in the interview process? Will this position be a good fit for me? Will it be a good personality, culture fit, professional fit? Just trying to assess, again, all of the facets of your application, right? And just trying to remember that this is a two-way street. And then rule number 4, as far as your thank you etiquette, I would say send a thank you note 24 hours after the interview. Definitely follow up with that thank you note. Be very concise, short and sweet. Express your appreciation for their time and your enthusiasm that you're passionate about and dedicated to this position, and refer to something that you discussed during the interview. And that's why debriefing after the interview and thinking about some of the questions that either caught you off guard and maybe you want to reiterate or submit a different response in your thank you note or your follow-up email, or maybe something that reaffirms your interest, like, oh my gosh, like all those values that they mentioned during the interview process really aligned with my core values, and I would really want to be part of the team to exercise them and to represent the company, right? Rule number 5 is follow-up. And here I would say that they give you a specific time frame. Respect, first of all, that time frame that they give you that you can follow up after if you do not hear from them. So only exception to that if you have like another offer in hand and you really need a decision to either provide it to that other employer, or just like for you to make a decision, either or. And then reiterate your interest and your enthusiasm, and don't be a pest. Don't try to follow up too much. I would say use this formula as far as like, okay, so you submitted your or you sent your thank you note 24 hours, and then in 3 days I would say follow up again, and then after that in 7 days do another follow up, and only after about 10 days I would say that would be your final follow up. And with each, again, follow up email, like we mentioned a few times in other Rockstar Live videos, include some of the personalized specific information. Again, not just a simple, maybe short sentence as far as like following up on the above, following up on this interview that we did last week. It's also a little bit of like that value that perhaps you can add. Also, that's something that is relevant and pertains to the job that you're applying for. And a few more challenging questions. So let's just wrap up with these 4 questions that I also wanted to bring up here. A very interesting question to navigate, actually, and to have and be prepared to have this type of discussion is that, what are your salary expectations? So I'm actually really curious to know what you guys usually say, and I feel like a typical reply would be with people actually giving their estimates or something that their desired salary, which I would encourage you to steer away from. Especially, it actually depends. It depends on if you're applying for a bigger company, and in the corporate world, it's something that you might want to actually invite your future employer into the discussion and have them first give their estimates. And then if you're a contractor, like a subcontractor, virtual assistant, or other virtual employer, virtual professional, we actually more work on the transparency of rates, I would say, as far as sometimes including our prices on the website. Is sometimes our packages are already part of our professional portfolio, right? And then so then that just kind of like eliminates that conversation. If you are, although, like having this type of conversation with your prospective employer, I would say a salary that falls within the market value, right, for this position. Definitely have a number in mind. I would say definitely then Google that market value. And I'm sure your company is competitive. What range did you have in mind for the role? That would be another way to spin this conversation and to throw that curveball at them, right? And then the ball is in their court, and they will probably have to reply or give you a little bit more information about their expectations. Another question that I would say here, number 2, is why should we hire you? And definitely refer to your strengths in your response and what makes you unique from any other candidate, right? So that would be also a good opportunity for you to bring a little bit more of like that idiosyncrasies, maybe from your professional experience, your background, and a little bit of that uniqueness, something again that would make you stand out. Number 3, why do you want to work here? And a little bit more on maybe like the meaningful and the personal side. I would say that this is an invitation to really talk a little bit more about the core values of the company, and don't just recite the information that you find on their website, but make it a little bit personal. Like I said, include maybe some impressive, catchy, memorable like closing line to your response, something that would actually stand out to them again and would be maybe part of your elevator speech. The last question is, why are you leaving your current employer? And I would say honesty is always the best policy. And at the same time, trying to be short and sweet, we do need to have a very good story, right? And a very good response for this particular question, especially maybe if your leave was not as amicable as we would always hope for, right? And maybe focus a little bit on the future and not the past. And the way how you can actually focus on the future would be, I had a great experience with this company ABC, learned a lot and developed a lot of professional skills that are now under my professional belt. Unfortunately, the project that I was assigned to ended, and there was very limited work available in my area of expertise. It could be the project, it could be maybe the launch that you were a part of, it could have been actually a temporary position period, or it might be that you just outgrew the types of responsibilities that you were performing for that client on the ongoing basis, and you wanted a new challenge. And that's why you can actually finish your response here. I am excited for a new challenge and for the new opportunities to grow. So these are, I feel like, very good core curveball questions that we sometimes definitely come across in our remote job applications, or maybe not just remote, but the general job application process. And these, I feel like, will give you a very good groundwork, or just lay out a very good foundation for you to just go in, jump in, maybe Google some answers, maybe spend some time and invest some time into creating those 4 to 6 stories that will definitely help you stand out and make your answers unique and memorable. Using that elevator pitch and maybe practicing it a little bit in advance is definitely a key here. So spend some time basically on investing into yourself, the way how you present, the way how you make that first impression. Maybe practice with your friend or maybe your loved one at home, and really be vulnerable. I mean, if this is just something that's out of your comfort zone, open up to them and be vulnerable, as far as like, I'm actually really, really nervous. I love you, but I'm nervous to be in front of you, and I'm nervous to be practicing this elevator pitch, but I do need your help in getting better. Because the thing is, like, that elevator pitch might not necessarily be only needed for this part of your journey as far as the application process. It might actually come handy in any of the networking opportunities that you might be a part of, whether online or offline. And when you are comfortable with delivering it, when you know that you own these words and that you've rehearsed and you feel confident and empowered in what you're saying, because you're actually truly passionate about what you're doing and you want the world to know about it, that's going to be just a very direct path to success, I have to tell you. Okay, cheers to your success. Thank you so much for sticking around. Let me know in the comments below if you have encountered any curveball questions that sometimes give you a little bit of a hard time. Definitely let me know if any of the questions that I listed have ever come up in your job application process, and if this is helpful, and anything else that could be typically helpful in your job application and interview process. I'm happy to and welcome all the ideas.